I think the only concern I would have from the Bills' perspective is that they're probably going to have to win 3 road games in the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl, which is very rare.
It's time now for Nuff Said with Bob Koshinski. Brought to you by Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, home of the famous spaghetti parm, and WEC Radio, the Big WEC, home of the oldies. Bob's guest today is Jonah Bronstein, online sports reporter for WIVB-TV.
Welcome back to another edition of Nuff Said with yours truly. And we're in the middle of the holidays, and I want to thank our great sponsor, Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, the home of the spaghetti parm. And if you haven't already booked a holiday luncheon here, you better get on the phone today because they're running out of space fast. And, of course, we want also a shout-out to the Big WEC and Buddy Shula and Company. And they're a great partner on the show, and I love listening to the oldies on the Big WEC. And this is next young man, our guest tonight. I won't ask your age, but maybe you're not listening to oldies. And, of course, your idea of oldies is probably not what my idea of oldies is. But the famous Jonah Bronstein is here today. And, Jonah, happy holidays. Thanks for coming out here to be with us today. And you couldn't have picked a better game to come on and discuss, of course, the 35-31 victory over the Patriots. And, for the longest time, they were the dreaded Patriots, and then not so much. But this year, all of a sudden, they come out of nowhere. So give me your synopsis of yesterday's game, because we're doing this on Monday. We're moving up because of the holidays and earlier podcast this week. Like everybody, if you're watching that first half, and if you go on social media, everybody quit. Everybody quit on the team. So what'd you think?
Off the top, it's an all-time great Bills game. I think it's one of the 6 biggest comebacks in history, tied for third. The great comeback in the playoffs. They had a 26-point comeback in the regular season, and then these are 21 points. They've done it a few times. And the last time they did it was 2011 at home against the Patriots. That was one of the most memorable games in Bills history, especially for that era. And here it happened again. It happened after another all-timer against Cincinnati. So if nothing else, this Bills team is very entertaining and serving the fans very well in terms of you can't give up on them. And, they're almost better, I think, playing from behind and playing with their backs against the wall in the second half. And defensively, this isn't the first time this season that they've had a terrible first half, made the right adjustments, and then they stopped the Patriots on pretty much every series except for one run in the second half. And I think it inspires a lot of confidence that this team can still make a run to the Super Bowl when that confidence was really at a low point when they fell down 21-0. And if you are still a Bills fan that hates the Patriots or has that disdain for that rivalry, it's got to feel good to prevent them from winning the division for at least, another week or two.
We both know not a lot gets done at halftime. There's not a lot of time to get together with the team and make massive changes. But there were some defensive changes, and I heard this morning that, in fact, one of the analysts said that May was facing 8 different defenses in that second half on third down, looking at the secondary and what they did and he definitely was holding on to the ball in the second half as opposed to the first half. And he really hurt them in the first half with his legs. And we saw none of that in the second half. So they definitely tightened it up. Whatever they did, they were able to get pressure, which they were not getting in the first half. Of course, Milano, really did a great job of rushing the quarterback. He had 2 sacks. And this is something we've seen before with this team. They say, well, we look at each other and we know it's time to come on. For whatever reason, the effort in the second half has been far greater than the first half, and maybe it's even a mystery to the coaches.
Yeah, and the players said that they made adjustments. They don't tell us specifically what the adjustments are. Some people that really know ball can look at it and see that I think they brought a little more pressure. They changed up the run fits. And adjustments aren't only made at halftime. They're made on the sidelines, in the booth. They're looking at iPads on the sideline. So I think that they figured out some run fits. And maybe the adjustments were to stop making mistakes, that certain defenders in that back 7 were not in the right spots on some of those runs, and they got better at that late in the second half. And Sean McDermott will never really come out and say this, but it's clear that in some of these games, he's taking over some of the play calling or some of the direction of the defense, sideline coaching that maybe he's not doing in the first quarter or in the game script early on. And that's been a common theme, I think, this season, that the defense doesn't start well. Sean McDermott grabs the reins, and then all of a sudden they're back to, this is probably the worst defense they've had in this AFC East Championship era, and maybe they were maybe worse in the very early years with Sean McDermott, but it might be the worst defense they've had under Sean McDermott. But there are times, like yesterday in the second half, when it does look every bit as good as these defenses that have ranked near the top of the league with Sean McDermott. And, if they can just get that going and play that more consistently, I thought at various points this season with the injuries and just the way they've been playing, the run defense, that this wasn't a championship defense, wasn't maybe even a playoff caliber defense. But they have shown in second halves and in some of their wins that they do have that ability to play that level of defense. And if they can somehow get that 3 weeks in a row in the playoffs with the way the offense is playing with Josh Allen, this is a Super Bowl contending team as long as they can play somewhere close to where they played in that second half week after week.
Defensively, I know that we've seen McDermott long enough to know that what his philosophy is. He basically defends the pass, and his teams have been notorious for giving up on the run. But his won-loss percentage shows that the odds are in his favor. That's the way he plays it. And I'm sure that comes from years of realizing that in the NFL, if you're playing the good teams, they've got great quarterbacks, and they're going to kill you with the pass. Yesterday, May in that first half looked like that guy we feared going into this game, this up-and-comer second-year quarterback who's very similar to a Josh Allen-style quarterback. He's big, he can run, and as I said earlier, he hurt them in the first half with his legs. But whether it was McDermott changing the scheme or what have you in the second half, he looked like a second-year quarterback in that second half. I mean, missed throws, some poor decisions, if you pressure a quarterback, whether you're Mahomes, whether you're Allen, you make everybody look human if you're able to get in their face.
Yeah, another hallmark of Sean McDermott's defense in Buffalo has been that they don't blitz a lot. And that was especially the case when Leslie Frazier was the defensive coordinator. I think they ranked near the bottom in the league in bringing that extra pass pressure. When Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator a couple of years ago, they were blitzing more. And I think in these games or situations where we suspect that Sean McDermott is more involved in the sideline play calling, you're seeing more blitzing in the second half. And I would venture a guess that a lot of this is disguise blitzes and stuff that the Patriots didn't expect. They didn't see on film from the Bills much in the previous weeks, and that was a bit why it was so effective, because Drake May, as good as he is, wasn't able to go to the line and predict where the Bills were coming from and then had to react, and it just was harder for him. And Joe Burrow said a little bit of this last week because I was in the Bengals post-game locker room, but he didn't say exactly what it was, but he said the Bills play the Bengals differently than they play other teams, and that they did do some of that last week, but they threw some wrinkles in the second half. They were a little different than what the Bengals were expecting the Bills to do in that matchup. And Sean McDermott, remember, came up under Jim Johnston in Philadelphia, who was an exotic blitzer disguising schemes, and the best that this defense has played was with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer being versatile, right, disguising coverages as safeties. And I think Sean McDermott seems to go into his bag of tricks and bring some stuff in the second half that maybe wasn't in the game plan or they haven't used in weeks or years, and make some really good play calls. I give the defensive coaching staff with Sean McDermott, Bobby Babich is probably very involved in this too. I shouldn't take him out of the equation. They've had some really great coaching performances in the game, even though the final stats, even Atlanta, when they were very, very bad in the second half, but they turned it on in the first half, and they turned it on in the second half and almost came back in that game. And I give the defensive coaching a lot of credit overall this season. Overall, it hasn't been the greatest body of work, but in games in the second halves, they've had some really fine moments.
The Houston game was the same thing.
Right, yeah.
You saw on that fourth down, around the 2-minute mark, Bosa dropped back off into coverage instead of rushing, and then came up when he had to and deflected that pass to basically get the Pats off the field. So it's just one of those games. I watched a game with some of my family and my one son, and my other son was texting, and everybody was, fire everybody, fire everybody. Because definitely it looked like they just didn't show up for the biggest game of the year. And they didn't. That first half, you got to scratch your head, like, how do you not come out ready to play? And now, in that first possession by the Patriots, that third down play, the catch that even CBS, when they reviewed it, said, looks like the ball hit the turf, and that would not have been a catch. I didn't see. I watched some of the post game. I don't know. Did you see anything? Was McDermott asked about that?
Addressed it. He said that they didn't have enough time to see the replay to know whether they should challenge it. And the Patriots, remember, rushed to the line to get that next snap off. Now, I don't know why replay assist came in on the next drive and with the catch that Brandon Cooks didn't make and didn't happen here for the Patriots. But for the Bills, they said it was because they didn't have enough time to watch the replay and get the challenge flag out before the Patriots snapped the ball.
Now, it was on the other side of the field, right? It wasn't on the Bills' sideline.
I believe so, yeah.
So that could have lent into that because they're not really getting a close-up view on the ball. I don't know. The first time I saw him catch it, I thought it looked like the ball hit the turf. But, as I said before we started rolling, if and buts for candy and nuts. So luckily that didn't come into play, but that definitely bailed out the Pats on the first series. And in the second half, I'm not saying the Bills got a break, but they got some calls that wouldn't necessarily always go their way, especially on the long pass to Shakir, where it looked like, the Pats came away with the ball, but it ended up interference. But they actually gave the catch to Shakir, which was a huge play.
Yeah, and the Bills got a penalty on that play and the catch. And I kind of thought, watching it myself, that it should have been an interception, but then the defensive pass interference would give the ball back to the Bills. But the Bills got both of those. And on that drive, I don't remember the number, on the next drive, New England had another drive where they get a penalty on the kickoff. Then they had, I think, about 3 or 4 of their own penalties and really shot themselves in the foot with holding penalties. They were moving the ball, but they never really got far down the field because they kept getting pushed back by the penalties. And, the officials are officiating the game. I'm never really much of a conspiracy theorist on that or thinking that the officials are favoring one team. But the penalties, the number of penalties and the number of calls, the Bills had more of them go their way yesterday, even if they didn't get the right break in that first play with the catch on the Patriots' first drive.
The one thing that I have to mention, because I've been mentioning it for the last 2 months leading up to this game, the Pats were coming off a bye week. Vrabel has been undefeated coming off byes. I've talked about this. There's no rhyme, no reason to it. They've asked McDermott about because he's got a great record after byes as well, and he always said, if I knew what it was, I'd do it every week. It just happens to be that's the way the ball bounces. But so obviously the Pats were well prepared and may have been doing things in that first half that, again, the Bills hadn't seen from the last time they played them. But if you look at the last time they played them, which may be why the Bills were favored, Buffalo did a lot of things to hurt themselves in that loss to them at home. And the Pats did something that week that other teams copied for a while, and that is they started playing the Bills man-to-man coverage, and the Bills just couldn't figure it out. The only guy that was getting open was Kincaid. And then they went a number of weeks without him in the lineup, and, you could hurt the Bills man-to-man. But in that second half yesterday, and that the Pats had a spy on Allen, but they defeated that in the second half. I don't know whether they sent out more guys on pass routes that they couldn't afford to have one guy sit back and just watch Allen, but I don't know enough about the intricacies of that part of the game to understand what happened. But whatever it was, you said it was a monumental comeback, and you can't have one of those without some certain, I won't call it luck, but fate going your way on a certain thing, some of the calls.
Yeah, and they seemed to make some adjustments offensively as well. Josh Allen was having a hard time with the pressure. He was running into sacks. Offensively, they couldn't get anything going for their first, I think, 3 possessions. And then all of a sudden, they didn't stop. They had touchdowns on 5 straight drives, I believe. So they figured something out and figured out what works for them, and they kept going to that. The Bills had their full complement of receivers and tight ends and pass catchers, which they haven't had very often this year. And even though a lot of people don't think the Bills have the most wide receiver talent or they're lacking in certain spots, but I think when they have the whole group together, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts in a way, and the offense functions better, and you saw that yesterday. They are a run-oriented ball control offense, and at their best. And really, it boils down to, I listen to your podcast pretty much every week, and I know you've mentioned this over and over again, the turnovers, and how important that is. When the Bills don't turn the ball over, they really don't lose. And when they do turn the ball over, sometimes they win, but it's a lot more precarious. They lose, or it's a lot closer to a loss. And yesterday they avoided those turnovers, and that was a big reason why they were able to find some rhythm, find some consistency, score some points, and control that game.
Well, their margin of error, it's just not what it was when they had all the top talent on their team, especially with Diggs and the guys, the receivers. Tasker talks about this all the time. When they won, they would beat everybody by double digits. This year, they don't. That's not the case because they don't have all the studs on offense that they had. But whatever they're doing, it certainly has opened up the field for Knox. I mean, yesterday he broke the record for touchdowns by a tight end in the history of the Bills. And for most of the first half of the season, he was invisible out there except as a blocker.
Yeah, and Dalton Kincaid had some big catches. Knox has been the guy they've been going to a little more, especially in the red zone. But Dalton Kincaid's presence on the field has been important for that, and he's made his own plays and his own catches since he's come back from his injury. Another thing, this isn't offensively, but Ray Davis is a really good player, and they seem to have trouble finding ways to get him the ball. Not trouble, but he's not a big part of the offensive game plan.
Right.
But now him as a kick returner, getting those touches that way, I think it's been 3 weeks in a row that he's had a really good return, and he had 2 really good ones yesterday, and that's helping the Bills get good field position and momentum. And I think Ray Davis is a popular player on the team, so when he makes a play, it seems to inspire the morale on the offense a little bit. He's part of the offense even if he's not out there for very many offensive snaps these days. And yeah, I think the Bills have enough talent on offense when everybody's playing and everybody's healthy and they can do everything that they want to do. But when one or two, when Palmer's out, when Kincaid's out, or when Shakir's out, when they're missing one of those guys, it seems to crumble a little bit when they don't have the full foundation.
All right, so let's look ahead. They're at Cleveland next Sunday. Cleveland's not good. They basically have one player on defense. It'll be interesting to see what they do offensively. They're prone for turnovers. If you look ahead at the schedule, the Bills, obviously are going to be favored to win easily against 2 of the teams. Whether that happens or not, who knows? But you've got the Eagles coming to town. The Eagles have had their problems. The Bills could end up 13-4 and not be division champs. I don't know we'll see what happens in New England now that they've been exposed a bit. You look at, and you hear all the rhetoric before the game. New England, the only team they had beaten with a winning record was Buffalo going into that game yesterday. They're going to be, at Baltimore Sunday night football. Baltimore is playing much better. But they're a funny team, too. They lost a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to remember. They lost to Cleveland. Or they lost to Cincinnati on Thanksgiving. It didn't look good at all. They shut them out yesterday in Cincinnati. And there's another whole story there with Joe Burrow and what he's going through. But anyway, this team definitely seems to be peaking at the right time. It'd be great if they could be AFC East champs because they'll get home field in the first game of the playoffs. But we were talking beforehand, they're a team nobody wants to see come into their stadium in the playoffs.
Yeah, and they're a team, this goes back a few years now, where I think they've only lost 1 game in December over the last 3 seasons, and they were unbeaten in December last season and so far unbeaten this year. And, I think the Bills can very well win these last 3 games. It might not get them the division title, and it might not make a huge difference for their playoff seeding or their playoff path. Maybe if they lose a game here toward the end of the regular season, it doesn't hurt them at all. Or maybe that last game against the Jets they don't need, and who knows if they're really trying to win. And last game in the stadium, red helmets. We'll see how all those dynamics play into it. But I think the only concern I would have from the Bills' perspective is that they're probably going to have to win 3 road games in the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl, which is very rare. Teams have done it, but it's very rare. It's been a while. Tampa Bay did it in 2020, but there were no fans in the stands for a lot of those games, or a different situation there. And I think 2010 might have been the last time it happened before that. So it doesn't happen often. And this isn't the best version of the Bills we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. And they're sometimes inconsistent, have some flaws, the run defense, issues with maybe the passing attack. It seems to be a tall task to think they can go and play their best and not stumble in any of those 3 road games, regardless of who the opponents are. Now, it's encouraging that they're not going to have to face the Chiefs and they're not going to have to face the Bengals. Those are the teams that have beat them in the playoffs. They might have to face Baltimore. That could be a tough team, but Denver looks good. But Denver and New England, Pittsburgh, maybe that's the team they play. They just don't seem as intimidating as going to Arrowhead Stadium has been the last few years, or playing the Bengals that really had their number in those playoff matchups. But so the Bills have won 2 in a row now, 3 in a row, and they might win the next 3, and then they got to win 3 more. I believe in the Bills. I think they're Super Bowl caliber. I think they're one of the very best teams in the NFL, but I'm not sure I believe in the Bills putting together that 9-game win streak with all those road games without one stumble at some point. So maybe a regular season loss, stubbing their toe before the playoffs, could be helpful.
Well, maybe the first half against Pittsburgh and New England we can count as stumbles. They just happen to recover from it in the second half.
Maybe.
Because when you look at those 2 road wins, they did not look good in the first half. And the Pittsburgh game, and now this has become ancient history, but if not for the Bosa sack and Benford picking up the ball and running it in for 6, that game completely turned around on that play. Last week against Cincinnati, Benford's pick for 6 turned it around. But yesterday there really wasn't a play like that. The Bills just came out. Davis's kickoff return did set them up for that first touchdown, and then they got a 3 and out, and then you could sense a shift in momentum because they always talk about the Bills' offense being on rhythm, and they definitely seem to be the kind of team like once Allen finds his groove, he just and you can see him look to the sidelines if they got a 4th down coming up, like no, we're I can feel it. Let's go for it on this play. And yesterday went for, what did they get, a 4th and 4, and it wasn't like 4th and 1. Let's just run the quarterback sneak. So anyway, okay. So I'm looking ahead. And, of course, one thing that can change the playoffs is you get an upset in the playoffs, and suddenly the seeding gets flipped around. So
it's possible that they could play 2 road games and then host the AFC Championship game.
Yeah. I wouldn't count on it, but that could happen. Jonah, we're going to wrap this up. Tell the viewers, where can we catch Jonah Bronstein?
WIVB.com. That's where I do. Well, that's where I work full-time, and you can catch most of my work on Twitter. I'm at LeBronstein. And I think you can find me there on various other social medias. If I know you're on TikTok every day, scrolling and checking out all the trends. But I'm not on TikTok, so don't.
I'm not on TikTok. Yeah. And you're with Tim Graham once a week.
Oh,
right?
yes. Weekly podcast, Tim Graham and Friends, TGAF. That's a lot of fun we do. And I should give Tim Graham is driving a lot of this reporting on the potential management changes with the Sabres and the things he's written about. I would, believe are true. And so, check out what he writes in The Athletic, and then we talk about it weekly on TGAF.
Well, thanks for being with us during this holiday season. Enjoy the holidays with your family. And next week, we're taking off for the holidays because I probably should go out and do some Christmas shopping. But, Jonah, thanks again for being with us. I want to wish everybody a great holiday season. We'll be back right the week after Christmas, right before the end of the year, with more Nuff Said with yours truly. Have yourself a great night and much better tomorrow.